As the morning sun peeked over the horizon, its golden rays bathed the emerald green mountains surrounding the village. Tu Diep, as always, was out early, gathering straight, sturdy bamboo stalks. Stopping in a dense patch of forest, she unsheathed a small knife from her belt and meticulously cut each segment of bamboo. Once split, these strong, flexible strips would become binding cords used to tie firewood or secure goods. She took her time, each cut precise and deliberate. Her small hands, though delicate, were strong and steady. After neatly bundling the bamboo strips, she wiped the sweat from her brow and moved on to her next task. She made her way to a field where she had planted cassava months ago. Kneeling down, she brushed away the layer of dry leaves covering the soil. The cassava plants stood in uniform rows, their roots buried deep, drawing nutrients from the earth. With careful precision, she used her knife to cut the stems, leaving behind short stumps before setting the stalks aside. As she dug into the soil, plump, healthy cassava roots emerged, their weight promising a good harvest. A small smile tugged at her lips. "This is a good haul today. Hopefully I can sell them at a fair price," she murmured to herself, a flicker of hope in her eyes. She tied the cassava into neat bundles using the bamboo strips she had prepared earlier. The laces were firm yet flexible, making it easier for her to carry them to the market without worry. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, she hoisted 2 bundles, one of cassava, one of bamboo, onto her shoulders and began her steady journey back to the village. At the market, she found a familiar corner where the locals often gathered to trade goods. Carefully laying out her harvest, she waited for customers. Before long, a middle-aged woman passed by and stopped to inspect the fresh cassava. "How much for a bundle?" Tu Diep looked up, greeting her with a warm smile. "Please, take your pick, auntie. The price is very reasonable." The woman nodded approvingly, selecting several bundles and handing over the payment. Tu Diep bowed slightly in gratitude, her heart swelling with quiet joy. As the day wore on and the market grew busier, her fresh cassava and durable bamboo courts sold out before noon. The earnings weren't much, but they were enough. Enough to sustain her. Enough to prove that she could stand on her own. Walking home under the bright afternoon sky, Tu Diep allowed herself a small, contented smile. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. After selling all her cassava at the market, Tu Diep walked along the dirt road, heading back to her small home. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the empty path. But just as she reached a secluded stretch of road, a figure suddenly appeared in front of her. Bakyan. Her steps halted. A cold wave of unease washed over her. Bakyan, the very man who had once sold her into Pau's household to settle his debts, the last person she ever wanted to see again. "I finally found you." His voice was hoarse but urgent. Tu Diep tightened her grip on the strap of her basket, instinctively taking a step back. "Why are you looking for me?" Her tone was flat, distant. Bakyan glanced around, as if making sure no one else was nearby, then stepped closer. "You need to go back to your husband's house. You still owe them a debt." His words struck her like a slap. Owe them? She had been abandoned, rejected, thrown out like she was worthless. And now they wanted her back. "I have nothing to do with them anymore," she said coldly, turning to leave. But before she could take another step, Bakyan grabbed her wrist and yanked her back forcefully. "No, you have to return. The Pau family needs you back." Tu Diep struggled, her breath quickening, fury burning in her eyes. "I owe them nothing. They humiliated me, cast me out, left me with nothing, and now they want me back?" But Bakyan refused to let go, tightening his grip. Though older, his strength was still formidable, making it nearly impossible for her to break free. "Come home. If you don't, Bame won't leave you alone." As he dragged her forward, Tu Diep fought with all her might, using her free hand to shove him away. She stumbled back, gasping for air. "I'd rather die than go back there." But Bakyan was relentless. This time, he seized her with both hands, locking his grip around her arms. Tu Diep twisted, kicked, did everything she could to resist, but she was no match for him. And so, despite her desperate struggle, she was forcibly taken back to Pau's house. The moment she stepped past the worn wooden doorway, a piercing shriek rang through the air. "You ungrateful wretch. You dare to disappear for all this time, and now you shamelessly walk back here." The barmaid stood in the center of the room, her hands on her hips, eyes sharp and filled with venom. Pau sat off to the side, still reeking of alcohol, his face flushed from drinking. He took one long look at her, up and down, before smirking. "Ha! You're just a woman after all. In the end you had to come crawling back." Tu Diep clenched her fists, biting her lip to suppress the rage boiling inside her. She knew one thing for sure. This was not a homecoming. This was a battlefield. At the logging site, James stood tall, his gaze steady as he observed the workers moving efficiently through the operation. The roar of chainsaws echoed through the dense forest as massive trees were felled and transported to the processing mill. Under his supervision, everything followed strict protocols, running smoothly and efficiently. Yet today, an unsettling feeling crept into his mind. Since morning, he hadn't seen Tu Diep. She usually returned to the small hut he had prepared for her after selling cassava or finishing her daily tasks. But today, she was nowhere to be found. Without hesitation, James got into his truck and drove toward her hut. When he arrived, an eerie stillness greeted him. The hut was dark and empty. The wind rustled through the trees, causing the thin curtain at the doorway to sway slightly. He stepped forward, eyes scanning the dim interior. "Tu Diep?" Silence. Only the distant chirping of insects replied. A deep sense of unease settled in his chest. James quickly searched the surrounding area, but there was no trace of her. Where had she gone? Sitting on the wooden chair inside the hut, he ran a hand through his hair, frustration weighing on him. He had promised himself not to interfere too much in her life, to let her build her independence. But why did her absence bother him this much? James waited late into the night, hoping she would return. Yet, the longer he sat there, the heavier the worry became. His fists clenched. If anything had happened to her, he would never forgive himself. The night stretched on, and with no other option, he left, his heart filled with unease. The next morning, while overseeing the construction site, James received an urgent phone call. "Boss, the excavator just broke down. There's a major oil leak, and it could delay the entire project." The worker's voice was tense. James's expression darkened. "Have you identified the cause?" "We're still checking, but it looks like an engine issue. If we don't fix it soon, it could cause serious setbacks." Without wasting another second, James hurried to inspect the machinery. Pushing his other thoughts aside, he focused on the problem at hand. Yet deep down, the unease about Tu Diep continued to gnaw at him. Early the next morning, Barmaid stormed in, hands on her hips, her sharp eyes fixed on Tu Diep. She shoved a large basket into her hands and pointed toward the tomato garden behind the house. "Go pick all the tomatoes." The soft morning sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting a golden hue over the garden. Rows of lush green tomato plants stretched under the sun, their ripe red fruits hanging heavily from the vines. But the peaceful scenery did nothing to ease the bitterness inside Tu Diep. She stood still for a moment, inhaling deeply before stepping into the garden. Her small hands reached out, fingers brushing against the smooth skin of the tomatoes. She carefully lifted each fruit, selecting the ones perfectly ripened before gently plucking them from the stems. Though the air was cool, sweat beaded on her forehead, rolling down her cheeks as she bent down to place each tomato carefully into the basket. She knew that if she wasn't careful, the tomatoes would bruise, making them harder to sell. So she worked with precision, her sharp eyes scanning every plant, ensuring none of the good ones were left behind. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the fresh scent of earth and greenery. But for Tu Diep, it brought no sense of peace, only suffocation. She wasn't picking tomatoes for herself, nor for survival, but because she was forced to. A burden imposed on her by the unjust debts of her so-called husband's family. Meanwhile, at a nearby drinking table, Powell sat among his friends, drowning himself in alcohol. One of them sneered and glanced at him. "What's the point of having a wife if she's useless? People say a man without kids is nothing. Maybe the problem isn't you, maybe your wife's the one who can't have children." Powell's grip tightened around his cup. The words stung, feeding the anger already simmering inside him. Returning home, drunk and seething, he kicked open the door. His face was flushed with rage as he grabbed Tu Diep's arm, pulling her toward their bedroom. "Fine! Tonight, you're staying with me!" Tu Diep struggled, desperately trying to break free. "Let me go!" Just then the door swung open. Ong Chio stepped inside, his voice deep and commanding. "Pao, let her go, now." Pao froze, his eyes still burning with fury, but after a tense moment he released her. Tu Diep stumbled back, her body trembling, tears welling in her eyes. She didn't know how much longer she could endure this. But one thing was certain, no matter what it took, she had to escape. The morning sunlight filtered gently through the leaves, casting a soft golden glow on the ground. This place had once been her only refuge, the one corner of the world where there were no cruel words, no beatings, no suffocating demands. Tu Diep stepped inside slowly, her gaze sweeping over every familiar detail of the small wooden hut. Every object held a memory, especially those tied to James. She remembered the first time he brought her pastries and essential supplies, the way he peeled a grapefruit and handed her a slice, the quiet evenings they spent gardening, cooking together, and the rare moments when he made her laugh without meaning to. But those smiles now felt like they belonged to someone else, to another life far beyond her reach. She no longer had the right to choose her own future. Tu Diep walked over to the wooden table, pulling a folded piece of paper from her sleeve. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up a pen, each stroke of ink slow and deliberate, as if pouring out all the emotions she had never dared to say aloud. "James, thank you for helping me when I had no one. Thank you for giving me shelter when I had nowhere else to go. But I can't accept your kindness anymore. I hope one day you will forget me and no longer have to worry about me." She exhaled softly as she finished, the weight in her chest pressing heavier than ever. Folding the letter neatly, she placed it on the table, next to a small cloth bundle, the set of clothes James had bought for her. It was the first gift she had ever received from someone who had no intentions of exploiting or controlling her. A light breeze slipped through the cracks in the wooden walls, making the letter flutter slightly. Tu Diep stood still for a long moment, as if trying to carve the image of this hut into her memory. Finally, she took a deep breath, turned around, and walked out. The door creaked shut behind her, sealing away the short-lived freedom she had known. Not long after, James returned. He stepped inside, his sharp gaze instantly landing on the table. The letter remained untouched, resting beside the bundle of clothes he had once given her. Reaching down, he picked up the note, his eyes scanning each word in silence. No one could tell what was going through his mind, but in that moment his expression darkened, his eyes deep and unreadable, like the still surface of a lake before a coming storm.
Người đàn ông đã kéo cô ra khỏi bóng tối quá khứ, trái tim cô rơi vào những khoảng trống không tên, như khi ánh sáng ban mai đều nhẹ rọi xuống. Một sự thật dần hé lộ trong cô. Cô yêu anh dù nỗi tự ti vẫn như một sợi dây vô hình trói chặt cô lại. Liệu tình yêu ấy có đủ sức vượt qua những rào cản của số phận, hay chỉ là một giấc mơ ngắn ngủi tan biến giữa thực tại khắc nghiệt? Hành trình trong tập này sẽ mang đến câu trả lời đầy bất ngờ và dây dứt. Buổi sáng tại trang trại nhỏ, Diệp thức dậy sớm hơn thường lệ. Cô đứng bên khung cửa sổ cũ kỹ, nhìn ra khu vườn rau xanh mướt đầy dần nảy mầm, lòng chợt dần lên cảm giác bình yên hiếm hoi. Nhưng sự bình yên ấy nhanh chóng bị xáo trộn khi cô nhìn thấy Giang, người đàn ông với nụ cười ấm áp đã làm trái tim cô rung động. Cô nhận ra mình yêu anh không phải từ hôm qua mà